The four-person limit on public gatherings in Hong Kong, part of measures to combat COVID-19, is becoming increasingly difficult to justify. Life in the city is almost back to normal, with no cases of local transmission of the virus. Public transport is packed, shopping centres are heaving, and parks are crowded. Live performance venues, cinemas, bars, restaurants and nightclubs are open again and offices are busy. But if you step outside as part of a group of 5 or more, you risk a fine of 25,000 Hong Kong dollars or up to 6 months in prison. It's bordering on the absurd. The restriction, first imposed in March 2020, is at odds with the widely accepted understanding that COVID-19 is less easy to transmit outdoors. It makes no sense that throughout the pandemic, people in Hong Kong have been free to gather and party in private homes, but not outdoors. Is the restriction driven by public health concerns? Or has COVID-19 been used by the government as a pretext for preventing protests? The question arose in court in early September with the sentencing of 12 Democrats for their roles in an unauthorised public commemoration of the 1989 Tiananmen crackdown. In 2020, police refused permission for the annual vigil in Victoria Park, citing a public health risk. Organisers claimed this was just an excuse, arguing that political sensitivities were behind the first ban on the event in 30 years. An estimated 20,000 people defied the prohibition. The court accepted there did not appear to be an outbreak of either violence or COVID-19 as a result. But the judge said the restrictions were intended to combat COVID-19 and were not designed to prevent people gathering for a common purpose or as a tool of suppression. The threat posed by COVID-19 was more serious in June 2020 than it is now. Infections were relatively low, but there were concerns then about a case cluster, and the following month a third wave did take hold. There were reasonable grounds for arguing the vigil would pose a risk of transmission. But there was also much sympathy for those who defied the ban because of the importance of the June 4 vigil to Hong Kong and its status as a symbol of the city's freedoms. With that in mind, the police sensibly adopted a restrained approach that evening, but arrests of leading figures were to follow. The ban set a precedent. The vigil was outlawed on public health grounds again this past June, when it was far less easy to justify. There were no local cases and life was returning to normal. COVID-19 helped bring an end to months of often violent anti-government protests in Hong Kong when it emerged last year. It provided an environment much more conducive to the passing of the national security law and the arrests that have followed. Peaceful protests have virtually disappeared in light of these developments. The police have generally rejected applications for larger demonstrations. Smaller rallies fall foul of the four-person rule. Anyone taking part in an unauthorised demonstration faces lengthy prison terms, unlike in the past. But peaceful protest is important to a functioning Hong Kong society. That is why the right to protest is preserved by the basic law. Even the security law states that the rights of free speech, assembly, procession and demonstration are to be protected. The government has become extraordinarily risk-averse with regard to both politics and the pandemic. Restrictions on peaceful and orderly gatherings should be relaxed as the threat of COVID-19 recedes. A start would be to lift the ridiculous four-person rule, something that applies as much to people just trying to get out for some fresh air as it does to protesters.